Hello everybody, Roger here, and welcome to my channel, Rogers Reads. So today I'm doing a book review of a book entitled The Golem and the Jinni, written by Helen Wecker. So I'm not sure how this book came to my attention. I believe somebody mentioned it on their booktube channel, but unfortunately I don't recall which channel it was. So as always, I'm going to do the review in a couple of parts: the story, what I liked, what I didn't like, and my final verdict. So the story. In The Golem and the Jinni, we have a blend of Arab and Jewish mythology and folklore, resulting in a mesmerizing historical fiction. So the story begins when a golem, which is a creature of Jewish folklore made of clay, is created by Kabbalistic magic by a former rabbi, now turned dark magician. So not yet awakened, she and her new master, it's a female golem, head from Poland to America to begin a new life. Now, the guy's plan was to awaken his golem once they arrived in America, but the man could wait no longer, so he opens his golem's crate and awakens her during their voyage. So she barely has a chance to get to know her master when he suddenly dies on the ship from a burst appendix. So she's masterless and confused and frightened, and she finds herself in New York City in 1899. Luckily, a local rabbi, Rabbi Meyer, recognizes her for what she really is and offers to help her integrate into this strange new society. Well, new for her anyway, because she's only been alive for a couple of days. So given that he can't simply refer to her as the Golem, the rabbi names her Chava. So the second creature in our story is a Jinni, a creature of Arabic folklore who is given the name of Ahmad. Now, a Jinni, perhaps more commonly known as a jinn or a genie. You might be familiar with the three wish-granting genie who comes forth from a magic lamp. So the Jinni is a creature of fire, and this particular Jinni was born in the ancient Syrian desert over 1,000 years ago. So he is accidentally released from a flask by a local tinsmith. So when the Jinni awakens, he notices that he has his iron wrist cuff on his wrist, which means only one thing: that he was trapped in the flask by a wizard, and that he's been inside the flask for over 1,000 years. So the Jinni has no memory of the wizard, nor how he came to be in the flask. So the story follows both the Golem and the Jinni as they try to fit in with their immigrant neighbors, all the while hiding who, or should I say what, they really are. You know, this is a wonderful tale of two creatures trying to fit into a world that neither of them understand. So one night they haphazardly meet on the streets of New York, and an unlikely friendship develops between the two of them. But one night, a dreadful incident occurs involving both of them, and because of that incident, the two of them retreat back into their own world and stop seeing each other. So in this way, the relationship is not only interesting, but it's also quite complex. So then a powerful evil, the villain of our story, arrives in town, and we learn that he is someone who links the both of them together. His arrival threatens both the Golem and the Jinni's existence, bringing them back together once again out of necessity. So on to what I liked about the story. So first off, I have to say that the characters of the Golem and the Jinni are some of the most unique that I've encountered. I also really enjoyed the fresh premise of a creature of Jewish mythology and one of Arab mythology coming together to form an alliance, and all of this blending into a fantasy/historical fiction novel made it all the more rich. Now, speaking of rich, the characters of the Jinni and the Golem were not only well developed, but very complex. I thought it was fun how this ended up being a story of two opposites, with the fiery, free-spirited, womanizing Jinni on one hand and the stoic, overly cautious, almost prudish Golem on the other, whose sole purpose is to serve a master. And even their age is miles apart, or should I say centuries apart, with the Golem being just days old and the Jinni well over 1,000. I also enjoyed all the wonderfully eccentric supporting characters. There was the ice cream seller, Sala. There was Anna, who was Chava's co-worker at the bakery. Abali, the tinsmith, who ended up freeing the Jinni. The rabbi's nephew, Michael, who runs the sheltering house. Miriam Fadul, I think her name was, the owner of the coffee house. And then all these characters were extremely riveting, and they added an essential element and depth to the story. But of course, my favorite characters were the Golem and the Jinni. And speaking of characters, I have to say that the character development is profound and pretty much ongoing throughout the entire novel, which made reading this all the more fun. It's also worth mentioning that though there was an enormous cast of characters, they were introduced slowly, one at a time, so the story never became confusing by too many characters. Sometimes you read a novel and all these characters are thrown at you at once, and that wasn't the case here. I love how, though Chava was only recently brought to life, she possesses an all too human empathy toward others. On the day of her arrival in New York, she ended up stealing food just to give it to a hungry boy. So she is definitely the more emotional of the two creatures and extremely sensitive to the feelings of others, as we see also in how much she cares about her coworker, Anna. So this might have something to do with the Golem's ability to hear the thoughts and to know the desires of others around her. Now, the Jinni, on the other hand, is wilder, passionate, and much more rash than the Golem. He's willing to explore his new world, whereas the Golem approaches it more hesitatingly, more cautiously. So no matter what happens to them in the story, we as the reader always need to remember that the Golem and the Jinni are two creatures tied to their natures, no matter how much they may wish to convince themselves otherwise. So in this way, the author brings her characters to rich life, letting all of them thrive in their complexity and near humanness. I did find it especially interesting how whenever these two creatures got together, they always ended up discussing deeply the human condition, quite an interesting topic for two non-human creatures. Another thing that really worked for me in this story was the exquisite world building. It's apparent that the author did an incredible amount of research for this novel. Research into setting both turn-of-the-century life in New York as well as of the Syrian desert of old. Research into culture, religion, into different groups of people that are represented in the story, into cultural magic as well as religious magic. I felt that the author did an expert job of integrating these details into the story while never thrusting an information dump onto us. And at times, I felt as though I really were in another place and time. We also get a riveting look into both the Jewish and the Arab immigrant subculture communities of the late 19th century. I also enjoyed how the author gives us bits and pieces, only a little at a time, of the Jinni's past. And as we slowly learn how he came to be trapped in the flask and what actions led up to that entrapment. So on to the cons, or what I didn't like about the novel. So in my humble opinion, there's not much to dislike about the book. My only real niggle is that it took about 6 months before the Jinni and the Golem finally encountered one another. I think it was around page 172 or so in the book. And I was getting a little bit impatient at this point for them to finally get together. There were a few points in the book where the story dragged a little bit, and I felt that there was some unnecessary description in places. But apart from that, I loved every moment of the story. So, final verdict. I felt that this book was fabulous. It was one of the most surprising and engrossing books I've read in a while, with plenty of action and drama to keep me interested in what happens next. It's a wonderfully rich and fascinating story of two mystical creatures, of old magicians and ancient cultures, with a unique, well-developed plot that was all brought together in a marvelous conclusion. And the prose is absolutely beautiful. The author really has a knack for bringing a scene to life in her pages, and I could easily picture the characters and the evocative setting. So The Golem and the Jinni was not only engaging, but also a wonderful study of human nature. It was an engaging book with well-rounded characters, a magical atmosphere, and phenomenal world building that I had a hard time putting down. So this book was actually written a while ago in 2013, but after researching the author a bit, I learned that she's working on a sequel entitled The Iron Season, which is due out this year, 2018, from HarperCollins. So I will definitely be picking that one up when it's released. So that's it for this time. I hope you enjoyed this little review of The Golem and the Jinni. And as always, I thank you so much for watching, and I appreciate your support. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.